She's the one! The UV trace is undeniable!
This is a disgrace! How could you bring such shame upon our family?
New Orleans, from a warm kitchen to a glass-lit museum. Lila Hart, a quiet pastry chef, just wants to belong to her new family. At the Blue Water Ball, alarms scream. Cameras swing. The $5 million sapphire crown is gone. UV dust glows on her scarf. Adrian freezes. In her palm, a small sail-shaped brooch, a secret lifeline. Can the truth slice through the glass before they erase her name? The morning light in New Orleans comes soft and sticky, like a glaze. Lila Hart stands in the back kitchen of a corner bakery on Magazine Street, hands dusted with flour, breath fogging the chilled glass of the display case she is stocking. She wakes before the streetcars and the tourists, before even the pelicans rise from the river. This is the hour she loves most. Butter is obedient. Sugar listens. The world is quiet enough to hear a heart make promises. She wears a simple gold band on her finger and keeps her hair pinned with a blue ribbon that matches the scarf draped over the chair where she rests between trays. The scarf is not expensive, but the color calms her. It reminds her of open water. On the inside of her linen jacket, pinned where customers will never see it, is a small silver brooch shaped like a sail. It came from her father years ago with a message, written in his quick hands on a fold of paper. When the wind turns, let it carry you, not break you. She keeps the note in a tin of vanilla beans, its edges ruffled by time. No one who buys her almond croissants knows that Lila Hart is married to Adrian Beaumont, heir to the Beaumont Maritime Museum. No one knows she is the daughter of Gabriel Hart, either. In this kitchen she is simply Lila, the pastry girl with the light touch. She prefers that. She prefers the quiet. It feels like choosing her own name when so much of her life belongs to other people's stories. Adrian arrives before the heat fully blooms. He is gentle with the door, as if sound might bruise her. He sets a newspaper on the counter and watches her cut a strip of candied orange peel. His tie hangs loose. He smells like hotel coffee and rain. "You were up early," he says. "I had a wholesale order for a hotel on Royal," she answers. "They like the tarts with the bruleed grapefruit. Tell your mother thank you for the introduction." He leans against the counter and swallows. "You know it wasn't her. It was the events coordinator. My mother just approved the list." Lila nods. In marriage, there are truths you leave out the way you scrape batter from a bowl, and still a thin film remains. "Do you have time to taste the new lemon sable?" she asks. "Or do you need to run to the museum?" "The Blue Water Ball planning meeting," he says. "Mom wants the sponsors to feel seen. Sabine is live streaming the first walkthrough. You know Sabine." "I do." She says it softly, like placing a glass where it will not shatter. His sister has 1,000 clever ways to make a person small. Adrian picks up the lemon cookie and eats it in 2 thoughtful bites. He smiles, and for a second the boy he once was peeks through the man he is still becoming. "You make quiet things feel like a celebration," he says. He means it. He loves her, even if love has not taught him how to stand up straight when the room leans. "I was thinking," he adds, "maybe you could design something for the ball, a centerpiece. It might help them see you." Lila wipes sugar from her palm. "I do not want to be seen for dessert," she says, but she is teasing. Kindness is a stern discipline with her. She gives it where she can, even to herself. A sugar sail, maybe, or a wave of pulled caramel, something that remembers the river. He brightens. "Exactly. They will love that." "They might tolerate it," she says, then tilts her head, which is also a beginning. He reaches for her hand. "Just be patient," he says. "They'll come around. My mother is not—" She is complicated. Complication does not excuse cruelty, Lila says. It comes out gentler than the truth feels. She is careful with her words because harshness ruins delicate work, and delicate work is all around her. "I can be patient," she adds. "But I won't be invisible." They eat the last crumbs at the stainless table by the window. Outside, a man hoses the sidewalk. The water carries the city's dust to the gutter, a silver river in miniature. Lila watches it flow and thinks of her father. He has always been the current under the surface of her life, powerful, invisible, moving her without showing himself. They speak often, but only in the spaces where secrets can breathe. He wanted her safe, ordinary. He wanted her far from cameras and boardrooms. She agreed. She wanted the same. When Adrian leaves, she locks the door and returns to the bench. She rolls out pâte sucrée and listens to the city wake. The brooch presses a crescent into her collarbone. She touches it, a quick check, like a pulse. She is not afraid. She has built a life from measured heat and steady hands. Yet, as she pipes rosettes of cream that hold their shape even when the tray trembles, she feels a warning gather like thunder a parish away. That afternoon, a courier arrives from the museum with embossed envelopes and tasting notes. "Mrs. Beaumont," he says, and the title sits on her like a coat meant for the wrong season. She thanks him and closes the door. She breathes. She rubs the sail between her fingers until her thoughts smooth out. At dusk, she climbs the stairs to their small apartment and places the scarf, the blue one, over the back of a chair. She studies its color in the failing light. Sapphire, almost. She doesn't know it yet, but this shade will matter. Glass will matter. The way truth bends and still shines will matter. Some nights a marriage is a harbor. Some nights it is a tide. Lila cannot tell which awaits her. She only knows the wind is changing. The Beaumont estate sits on the edge of the garden district, all marble staircases and portraits that smell faintly of oil paint and judgment. When Lila married into this house, she thought she could earn warmth with kindness. She baked for every occasion, left handwritten notes on silver trays, and helped arrange flowers in the foyer. But every smile she offered came back cold. In the mornings, Genevieve Beaumont descends the staircase like a verdict, perfectly dressed, pearls gleaming even in the shadows. She never raises her voice. She doesn't have to. Her tone does the work of a whip. "You've oversteeped the tea again," she says, holding the cup Adrian brewed. A woman of refinement knows when to remove the leaves. Lila keeps her head bowed. "I'll fix it, Mrs. Beaumont." "Genevieve," the older woman corrects. "You may call me Genevieve. Everyone does." Then she adds, "except family." Adrian appears behind his mother, tie already loosened, an apologetic smile half-formed. "Mom, please." "It's fine," Lila interrupts gently. "She's right. I'm still learning." Genevieve turns away, satisfied, leaving behind the scent of gardenia and authority. When she's gone, Adrian sighs. "I swear she doesn't mean it." "Yes, she does," Lila says, folding a napkin. "She just means it politely." He runs a hand through his hair, as though untangling the knots of his family could start there. "She'll come around." Lila gives him a small smile. "So you keep saying." Later that afternoon, Lila scrolls through her phone and finds a video from Sabine Beaumont's social channel. The caption reads, "When your brother marries the help." The clip shows Lila in the museum kitchen, arranging pastries for a charity luncheon, caught mid-blink, looking awkward, small. The comments sting more than the words. Laughing emojis, heartless remarks, people comparing her to Cinderella after midnight. She closes the app, heart heavy. The blue scarf rests around her shoulders, soft against her skin. She tightens it as if it could shield her. That night, she and Marcus, her father, talk over a quiet call. He is still in his workshop on the riverfront, soldering solar coils under a low lamp. His voice carries the calm of a man who's seen storms and outlasted them. "They're testing you," he says. "Not because you're weak, but because you remind them what grace looks like." "And grace scares people who live on masks." Lila laughs softly. "You always make it sound simple." "It is simple," he replies. "Not easy, but simple." I thought marrying Adrian would mean peace, she confesses. But it feels like standing in someone else's museum. Beautiful, but everything behind glass. Then stop trying to belong to their display, her father says. You're not an exhibit, you're a creator, and sooner or later they'll learn that. The next morning, the family gathers for breakfast in the sunroom. Genevieve sits at the head, flanked by Adrian and Sabine. Lila brings out the brioche herself, fluffy, golden, brushed with honey. Sabine, filming her phone at a flattering angle, mutters, "Domestic life looks good on you, Lila. I almost forgot you used to work for a living." Lila pauses, then answers lightly, "I still do." Sabine looks up, a fake laugh slipping out. "Oh, right. You mean baking? Cute." Adrian shifts in his seat. "Sabine, that's enough." But Sabine smirks. "I'm just saying, some of us were raised for these tables, and some of us serve them." Lila meets her gaze. "And some of us build them." The room goes silent. Even Genevieve's teacup freezes mid-air. Then the older woman says, "Perhaps that mouth would serve better in silence, Mrs. Beaumont." Adrian starts to speak, but Lila lays a hand on his arm. "It's all right," she says. "She's right. I've spoken enough for today." She rises from the table with quiet grace, each step steady as a heartbeat. Outside, the jasmine vines twist around the balcony rail, the air heavy with sweet dampness. Lila leans on the marble ledge, gazing toward the distant masts of ships beyond the river bend. For a moment, she thinks about running, back to her kitchen, to simplicity, to safety. But then she remembers her father's words. Grace scares people who live on masks. That night, when Adrian returns from the museum, she is at her sketchbook, drawing sugar designs for the Blue Water Ball centerpiece. He stands behind her, watching the arcs of caramel she's planned like sails catching wind. "I told Mom you'd be designing the dessert," he says carefully. She didn't object. "That's her way of approving," Lila says with a soft laugh. He smiles. "See? She's coming around." She looks up at him, her husband, so earnest, so unwilling to see what she already knows. "Adrian?" she asks. "If they ever made you choose between their world and mine, which would you choose?" He blinks, caught off guard. "Why would I ever have to?" "That's what I used to think," she whispers. The blue scarf slips from her shoulder as she writes the final note beside her sketch. Sugar sails must withstand humidity. She doesn't yet know that soon, it's not sugar that will be tested, it's truth itself. The Beaumont Maritime Museum gleamed that evening like a ship made of light. Every arch shimmered. Every marble step reflected the glow of chandeliers shaped like breaking waves. The Blue Water Ball had always been the Beaumonts' pride, a night of sponsors, cameras, and glittering names whispered over champagne. Lila stood near the pastry display, adjusting a final ribbon of sugar glass. Her creation, a sculpted ocean of blue spun sugar with sails of crystallized fondant, rested at the center of the ballroom. It was delicate, breathtaking, and impossible to ignore. Adrian brushed past a crowd of journalists, his tux crisp, his smile gentle but strained. "You've outdone yourself," he whispered, kissing her cheek. "It's stunning." "Thank you," she said softly. "Maybe they'll see tonight that I belong here." He squeezed her hand. "They will, I promise." But promises, she was learning, didn't hold much weight in a room built on glass. At the far end of the hall, Genevieve stood like a queen surveying her court, Sabine beside her in a backless gown glittering like frost. The older woman's expression didn't change when she saw Lila. Sabine's, however, curved into a smirk. "She really brought bakery art to a gala," Sabine said under her breath. "How charming." Genevieve's response was mild. "Every castle needs a servant to remind us of gratitude." Lila couldn't hear them, but she could feel the temperature drop, like the moment before a storm. The evening unfolded with speeches, polite laughter, and flash photography. Lila watched from the edge of the crowd, trying to blend into the background while her dessert became the centerpiece of every conversation. Even guests she'd never met complimented its beauty. "It looks alive," said one woman, "like the tide's about to turn." Lila smiled, whispering, "Maybe it is." Just before midnight, the main exhibit hall opened. There, under bulletproof glass, rested the crown jewel of the museum's collection, the Creole coronet. A sapphire-studded crown from the 1800s, said to have been lost at sea and later recovered from a sunken vessel. Its deep blue stones caught the light like a living flame. The crowd gasped. Even Lila felt her breath hitch. The sapphire color matched her scarf almost exactly. Sabine approached her, swirling her champagne. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Yes," Lila said. "It's like something made of sky." Sabine smiled, tilting her glass. "Be careful not to get too close. Mother says some things are meant to be admired, not touched." Lila met her eyes. "That's funny. She told me the same thing about this family." Sabine blinked, momentarily disarmed, then gave a brittle laugh. "Oh, lighten up. You're too sensitive." As Sabine turned away, her elbow brushed Lila's arm, sending her silk scarf sliding to the floor. "Oops," she said sweetly, crouching to pick it up. "Clumsy me." But her manicured fingers lingered longer than necessary. When she returned the scarf, her perfume hung heavy, and something faintly metallic glittered under the lights. "Keep it safe," Sabine said, smiling too wide. "Wouldn't want to lose it." Lila frowned, but Sabine was already gone, her heels clicking like punctuation marks on the marble floor. Moments later, Adrian joined her again. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just tired." They shared a quiet drink on the edge of the crowd as the host prepared to start the auction. The night pulsed with soft jazz, clinking glasses, and the low murmur of wealth congratulating itself. But beneath the music, Lila felt a strange unease. Her pulse wouldn't slow. The blue scarf itched against her skin, though she couldn't say why. "Come on," Adrian said, placing a hand on her back. "They're about to unveil the final item." As the curator stepped onto the stage, a wave of applause filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "the highlight of tonight's auction, the Creole coronet." The lights dimmed, the glass case illuminated. Cameras flashed. Then, suddenly, the alarms erupted. Red lights swept the walls. A voice over the intercom shouted, "Security breach in the exhibit hall! Lock all exits!" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Genevieve clutched her pearls. "What's happening?" "The crown," someone said. "It's gone." Gone. Lila blinked toward the empty pedestal. The glass was intact, but the sapphire crown had vanished. Sabine's shrill voice sliced through the chaos. "She was just there," she screamed, pointing straight at Lila. "I saw her near it not 10 minutes ago." Dozens of eyes turned at once. Lila froze. Her heart thudded like thunder trapped in her ribs. Adrian stepped forward instinctively, but his mother's hand on his arm stopped him. "Don't," Genevieve whispered coldly. "Not yet." A guard approached. "Mrs. Beaumont, we need to ask you to step aside." "Me?" Lila's voice cracked. "You think I—" "Standard procedure," the man said, though his gaze carried doubt. Cameras whirred, guests whispered. Sabine lifted her phone, her face glowing in the screen's reflection. "Oh, this is going to be so interesting," she said under her breath. The ballroom that had glistened like water now felt like ice. Lila could barely breathe as she was led toward the glass security chamber at the center of the museum. Her own sugar sails shimmering mockingly in the distance, fragile as her reputation. The night of illusions had just begun to shatter. The museum's grand ballroom had fallen into stunned silence, save for the hum of security radios and the soft click of heels against marble. Under the glass skylight, Lila stood motionless, surrounded by guards, the light from the chandeliers cutting sharp lines across her face. Her scarf, a once beautiful silk ocean, now lay twisted in one guard's gloved hand. "Please," she said softly, "tell me what this is about." "Mrs. Beaumont," one officer said, voice flat, "we're conducting a UV trace inspection. The exhibit was tampered with. Standard procedure requires we check for reactive markers." "Markers?" she repeated. Sabine, standing at a deliberate distance, spoke up, voice dripping in sympathy. "You know, the security system uses powder on display cases. If someone touches the glass, it leaves residue. It's invisible under normal light." She gave an apologetic smile. "Just science, darling. Nothing personal." Genevieve stepped closer, whispering to Adrian, "You see how calm she is? That's not innocence. That's calculation." Adrian turned sharply. "Mother, stop. This is ridiculous." Genevieve folded her arms. "Is it? Or is it finally clarity?" The guards lifted Lila's scarf beneath the UV beam. In an instant, the fabric glowed with streaks of fluorescent dust. Bright, undeniable, damning. A collective gasp filled the room. Cameras rose like vultures. Sabine's phone was already recording, her lips curving as she whispered to her followers, "Caught red-handed at the Blue Water Ball." Adrian's face went pale. "That can't be. She hasn't even—" But his words drowned under the growing murmur. Thief. Imposter. Gold digger. Lila's heart pounded, yet her voice, when it came, was steady. "Then search me," she said. "Properly. With female witnesses. Record everything. I have nothing to hide." The chief of security hesitated. "That's not protocol. It is if you care about truth," she said. "I'll cooperate, but I won't be humiliated." Still, no one moved. No one spoke for her. Adrian tried, but Genevieve's icy hand tightened on his wrist. "Let the authorities handle it," she hissed. "If she's innocent, she has nothing to fear." Lila caught the words and almost laughed, a hollow, stunned sound. "That's exactly what guilty people say," she murmured. The guards began to search her bag, spilling its contents across a mirrored table. A lipstick, a phone, a folded napkin with sugar sketches, and a small silver brooch shaped like a sail. Sabine leaned close enough for the cameras to catch her expression. "So much for grace under pressure." Lila met her gaze. "Grace isn't for show," she said quietly. Minutes passed. Nothing incriminating appeared, but the damage was already done. Genevieve turned to the curator. "You'll notify the board. We can't risk our family's reputation over appearances." "Of course, Mrs. Beaumont," the curator said, voice trembling. Adrian finally stepped forward. "This is madness." "You're accusing my wife with no proof." "Adrian," Genevieve snapped, "you will not choose her over us." He froze. The room held its breath. Lila watched him, every second carving itself into her memory. The man she loved, torn between loyalty and fear. The silence between them said more than any accusation could. The guard cleared his throat. "Mrs. Beaumont, you're free to leave for now, but we'll need to retain this for examination." He lifted her scarf with tongs, sealing it into a plastic bag. Lila nodded. "Keep it," she said softly. "You'll need it later, for evidence of something very different." Sabine frowned. "Oh? What's that supposed to mean?" Lila turned, meeting her sister-in-law's eyes. "That light cuts both ways." She walked toward the exit, each step deliberate, the crowd parting like a tide. Behind her, the chandeliers flickered, reflecting in the glass walls that now felt more like a cage than a ballroom. Outside, the rain had started again. Thin at first, then steady, washing the night clean. Lila stopped beneath the museum's awning, her reflection trembling in the puddles. The humiliation burned, but so did something else. Resolve. From her purse she pulled the brooch, the small silver sail, and pinned it to her lapel. It caught the streetlight, gleaming faintly, alive. The symbol of her father's love, of freedom, of truth that refused to drown. She whispered, almost to herself, "Not tonight. Not like this." And then, as thunder rolled across the city, she took out her phone and dialed a single number. "Ava," she said when the line connected. It's time. Activate code Switchwater. The attorney on the other end went silent for a heartbeat, then replied, calm and sharp, "Understood." Lila looked back at the glowing museum through the rain-streaked glass. Inside, Genevieve smiled for the cameras. Sabine posed in triumph, and Adrian stood motionless, his expression unreadable. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what storm they had just invited in. The clock inside St. Charles Cathedral struck midnight as rain slicked the cobblestones outside the Beaumont Maritime Museum. Inside, the once lavish gala had dissolved into nervous whispers and flashing police lights. Lila stood at the edge of the parking courtyard, her umbrella forgotten, her hair damp and curling against her cheek. Her phone buzzed. "Ava Nguyen," came the crisp voice on the other end. "Code Switchwater confirmed. Are you safe?" "I'm fine," Lila said, "but they made sure I'd never forget tonight." "Good," Ava replied, "because neither will they." Lila glanced back through the glass facade, where silhouettes moved under flashing red and blue lights. "I need you to run something. The museum's private procurement logs. Look for any chemical order tied to Sabine or the director, Monroe. Use Heart Renewable's compliance key." "On it," Ava said. "Do I contact your father?" "Not yet," Lila murmured. "He'll know when he's supposed to." When the call ended, she stood there for a long moment, rain pooling around her shoes. She could still see her reflection in the glass, a blurred version of herself, half shadow, half light. The scarf was gone, but its loss no longer felt like shame. It felt like the beginning of proof. Inside the museum, the chaos continued. Guests whispered theories, cameras lingered on the empty pedestal, and Genevieve managed her crisis with the grace of someone accustomed to controlling disaster. "She left," Sabine said, dabbing fake tears for her followers. "She just ran off into the rain." Genevieve's eyes hardened. "Good. Let her. Tomorrow, the story will say the Beaumonts were victimized by an opportunist, and we will be the picture of restraint." Adrian stared out at the rain-soaked courtyard, his heart heavy. "You talk about her like she's a stain, not a person." Genevieve's voice softened, but her words were iron. "A woman who brings scandal into this family cannot stay in it." He wanted to argue, to shout, but the weight of his mother's certainty and his sister's smugness left him silent again. Meanwhile, Lila crossed Poydras Street, the city around her humming with jazz and thunder. She stopped under a flickering street lamp, the silver sail pinned to her jacket gleaming faintly. She could almost hear her father's voice in her mind, steady, unhurried. "When the wind turns, let it carry you, not break you." She smiled faintly. "It's turning, Papa," she whispered. At the same time, in a quiet office miles away, Ava Nguyen typed quickly, her laptop screen glowing in the dark. A list of museum orders filled the display, hundreds of line items. She scrolled until one caught her eye. UV Reactive Identification Powder, batch number 41B, requisitioned by S. Beaumont, approved by Director Monroe. Her fingers froze. "Oh, Sabine," she murmured, "you really should have deleted your trail." Ava composed an encrypted message and sent it to Lila's private inbox, attaching the full log with timestamps. Then, just before closing her laptop, she hesitated. With a lawyer's instinct, she also uploaded a copy to Gabriel Hart's encrypted server. Because if there was one man who knew how to turn injustice into headlines, it was him. Back at the museum, Sabine laughed too loudly as reporters hovered near the barricades. "We'll cooperate fully," she told one, brushing her perfect hair back. "Our family has nothing to hide." Adrian walked away before she could finish. He found the gallery where Lila's dessert still stood untouched, the sugar sails glinting faintly under the emergency lights. The sculpture looked fragile, almost mournful, an ocean caught mid-storm. He reached out and touched the tablecloth beneath it. It was damp, as if tears had fallen there. "Sir?" a guard asked softly. "You should leave now. The investigation's underway. Adrian nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He could still see Lila's face when they shamed her, calm, resolute, proud even as the world turned on her. He had stood there, frozen, when he should have stood with her. He left through a side door, stepping into the rain, and found her car gone. The storm had scattered every trace of her, except one small thing. Lying near the curb was the napkin she'd carried earlier, now soaked and smudged, but still bearing her sugar sketches. At the bottom of the page, in delicate pencil, she had written a single phrase: "Beauty is only as strong as truth." He folded it carefully, heart aching. At sunrise, the city woke to chaos. The Times-Picayune headline blazed, "Sapphire Crown Stolen from Beaumont Museum. Insider Connection Suspected." By mid-morning, the story had gone viral. Photos of Lila, humiliated under UV light, flooded the internet, taken straight from Sabine's live stream. Hashtags trended. Hashtag Blue Water Ball had the thief bride. At her bakery, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, strangers, hate messages. Lila ignored them all. She set down her apron, opened her laptop, and saw Ava's encrypted file waiting. Inside was the proof: timestamp, purchase order, delivery log, signature, Sabine Beaumont. Lila stared at the screen, the rage and sorrow folding into something sharper: purpose. She took a breath, clicked forward, and typed 2 words in the subject line: "For father." Then she pressed send. Miles away, Gabriel Hart's phone buzzed on his desk in a Manhattan boardroom. He opened the email, read every word, and quietly rose. He adjusted his cufflinks, picked up his coat, and said to his assistant, "Cancel my meetings. There's something I need to return to New Orleans." The assistant blinked. "Sir, what should I tell the board?" Gabriel's blue-gray eyes didn't waver. "Tell them," he said, "that family comes before profit." And with that, the storm began to shift its direction. By the time the morning light hit the museum's stained glass windows, the Blue Water Ball had become a headline of humiliation. The Beaumont family issued statements of innocence. Reporters camped outside their gates. And in the quiet corridors where champagne had flowed just hours earlier, whispers clung like fog. Lila returned, not as the accused wife, but as a woman gathering truth. She had barely slept. Her hands trembled as she clipped her ID badge back onto her coat, a relic of the days she'd volunteered in the museum's kitchen. The security guards hesitated when they saw her, unsure whether to stop her. She didn't wait for permission. She walked past the exhibit hall, now taped off with yellow barriers, and stopped by a narrow door marked "Maintenance Access Only." Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Every empire hides its shame behind locked doors." She used her key. The hallway beyond was dim and smelled faintly of bleach and steel. The hum of air conditioning drowned out the city noise. She pulled out her phone, tapped an app Ava had installed, and the screen lit with infrared overlay, showing blind spots in the security cameras. Her steps slowed when she reached one, a stretch of wall behind the medication storage room, invisible to any lens. She knelt, brushed her fingers over the baseboard, and smiled faintly. "You always did leave your corners dirty, Monroe," she whispered. A soft creak echoed down the hall. Her heart skipped. "Lila?" a voice said. It was Adrian. His tie was undone, his eyes heavy. "I thought you'd be long gone." She straightened. "I thought you'd have something to say before I left." He hesitated, guilt pressing into his shoulders. "I didn't know what to say." "You could have said, 'I believe you.'" He winced. "I wanted to, but everything was happening so fast, and your mother was watching." Lila finished for him. "Always your excuse." He took a step closer. "You don't understand how she operates. She built this family's image from dust. She'd burn me before she let me ruin it." Lila met his eyes. "Then you married someone who refuses to burn." They stood in silence, the tension thick as the humidity outside. Adrian's voice softened. "Please, tell me you didn't come back to fight them. They'll destroy you." She looked toward the corridor ahead. "They already tried." He reached for her hand. "Let me help." For a moment, she almost let him, but she remembered the cameras, the laughter, the word thief whispered behind manicured hands. "No," she said finally. "If you help me now, it'll only be because you're afraid of what happens if I win." She turned away before he could answer. At the end of the corridor, she found the maintenance cabinet her father had once mentioned, a leftover from the museum's early days. She pulled it open, revealing old mops, cleaning supplies, and behind them, a tangle of unused security wiring. The wires led to a small panel, slightly ajar. She pressed a button on her phone, and the signal blinked green. "Camera offline," she murmured. From her bag, she retrieved a small black device, one of her father's prototypes for an environmental sensor. It could detect chemical compounds, temperature shifts, even fingerprints of residue. She placed it behind the baseboard and waited as the readings filled her screen. Compound detected: UV reactive phosphor. Concentration: high. Source: air vent contamination. Lila frowned. "They dusted the entire room," she whispered. "Not just the crown." She switched to thermal mode. The screen showed faint outlines of footprints, one large, one small, leading to the staff exit door. The larger prints looped back. The smaller ones didn't. Sabine's shoes had been spiked stilettos. Director Monroe, however, wore standard museum footwear, black soles, regulation size. Lila smiled grimly. "Two conspirators," she said under her breath, but one walked out empty-handed. Her phone buzzed. "Ava." "Got your data?" the attorney asked. "And more," Lila replied. "Monroe's the muscle, Sabine's the show." "Good. Then you'll want to check your email," Ava said. "Your father's on his way. He just wired $10 million into the museum's charity fund under the Hart Foundation name. He'll have every reason to walk right through the front doors." Lila's throat tightened. "He knows?" "Yes," Ava said softly, "and he's angry, but not at you." Lila exhaled, relief mixing with dread. She knew her father's temper was quiet but world-shaking. When Gabriel Hart moved, institutions trembled. She tucked the sensor back into her bag and turned toward the corridor. "Tell him I'm ready." Adrian was waiting at the entrance, eyes wide. "What did you find?" She met his gaze. "The truth. And this time, I'm not asking anyone's permission to show it." He stepped aside as she passed. "Lila, I'm sorry." She didn't look back. "Then say it to the woman they tried to erase." Outside, the clouds began to break, sunlight spilling through like redemption itself. The museum gleamed again, beautiful, fragile, and about to host the reckoning it had earned. And somewhere over the city, a private jet began its descent, carrying a father whose silence was more dangerous than thunder. The next morning, the Beaumont Maritime Museum stood polished and pristine again, as if the night's chaos had never happened. Workers swept the marble floors, resetting the stage for the press conference Genevieve had arranged, an attempt to rewrite history before truth could catch up. But in the East Wing, behind the sealed exhibit doors, Lila and Ava stood shoulder to shoulder, eyes fixed on the laptop screen streaming the hidden footage from Lila's tiny sensor camera. The air felt charged, like the seconds before lightning. "There," Ava said, pausing the video. "That's your timestamp, 9:14 p.m., Dr. Monroe enters through the staff corridor." The image was grainy but clear enough to show him glancing over his shoulder before pulling a small vial from his coat pocket. He poured the contents into a cloth and wiped the crown's display case. Lila's stomach twisted. "That's the UV dust Sabine used on my scarf. He's prepping it." "Keep watching," Ava murmured. The next frame caught Sabine stepping into view, still in her sequined gown. She handed Monroe a new case, identical to the original, her lips moving with smug precision. The audio barely caught her words. "Make it look perfect." She'll be standing right there when it disappears. Lila's breath caught. They rehearsed it. They framed you like a performance, Ava said. And tonight, we let the curtain fall. Before they could say more, the door creaked open. Marcus Johnson, Lila's father, stood in the doorway, his white shirt rolled to the elbows, gray in his beard glinting under the light. He looked out of place among the marble and gold, yet his presence filled the room more completely than any chandelier. "Hello, sweetheart?" he said quietly. Lila's composure broke. "Papa." She moved into his arms, tears she hadn't realized she'd been holding spilling freely. He held her tight. "I saw the footage. I saw what they did." His voice didn't rise, but something behind it trembled with fury. "You kept your head. You did everything right." "I almost broke," she whispered. "But I remembered what you always said. When the wind turns, let it carry you." He smiled faintly. "Looks like the wind's about to turn in their direction." Ava closed the laptop. "Mr. Hart, the board meeting starts in 30 minutes. The museum's trustees, the Beaumonts, and the press will all be there. You'll have one chance to expose them cleanly, without it looking like retaliation." Gabriel nodded. "We'll do it publicly, by the book. No shouting, no spectacle. Truth is enough." Lila looked between them. "Then let's end this." At noon, the museum's atrium filled again, this time with reporters, trustees, and staff in uneasy silence. The Beaumonts sat at the front table, Genevieve immaculate in pearls, Sabine rehearsing sorrow for the cameras, Adrian, pale and restless beside them. When Gabriel Hart entered, the room stilled. He didn't arrive with bodyguards or fanfare, just a single leather briefcase and the calm authority of a man who built empires from silence. "Mr. Hart," the museum director stammered, rising. "We didn't expect—" Gabriel raised a hand. "Please, sit. I won't take much of your time." He glanced toward his daughter. "Before we begin, I'd like to return something that was never truly lost." Lila stepped forward, carrying a small velvet box. Inside lay the Creole coronet, glimmering under the skylight, its sapphires gleaming like ocean eyes. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sabine's mask cracked for a split second before she quickly forced a smile. How wonderful that it was recovered. Lila didn't answer. Gabriel gestured toward the large projection screen behind them. "Before we celebrate, let's understand how it disappeared." The screen flickered. The footage played. Monroe entering the exhibit. The vial. The cloth. Sabine's sequined silhouette. Her words, audible now through Ava's audio enhancement. "She'll be standing right there when it disappears." The room froze. Genevieve's face went white. "Sabine, what is this?" Sabine's voice cracked. "It's edited. It's fake. Dad, tell them." "Enough," Adrian said, standing abruptly. His voice shook, but it carried. "Stop lying. I saw you near the exhibit that night. I just didn't want to believe it." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Reporters scribbled frantically. Gabriel waited for silence. "The Beaumont family has my sympathies," he said evenly. "But sympathy does not erase accountability." He turned to the trustees. "The Hart Foundation funded your renovation, your archive digitization, and your educational programs. As of this morning, those funds are under independent review. Effective immediately, I've requested full audit oversight for this institution." Genevieve stood, trembling with rage. "You have no right to—" "I have every right," he interrupted calmly. "You made my daughter your scapegoat. You thought her kindness was weakness. You forgot that truth leaves its own fingerprints." His words landed like quiet thunder. Lila stood beside him, eyes steady, voice soft but strong. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came for clarity, for every woman who's ever been shamed and told to stay silent." Adrian's eyes glistened. "Lila, please." She looked at him for a long moment. "I don't hate you, Adrian. I just can't love someone who only remembers me when the room's gone quiet." He lowered his head, the weight of his silence finally visible. As security escorted Sabine and Monroe from the room, Genevieve sank back into her chair, her empire crumbling around her, the cameras still rolling. And in that charged stillness, Lila finally exhaled. Her scarf was gone. Her name, however, had never shone brighter. The sky over New Orleans darkened early that afternoon, as if even the weather sensed the city was about to witness something unforgettable. Reporters swarmed the Beaumont Museum steps, microphones clutched like weapons, lights glaring against the rain-polished marble. Inside, the press conference had ended, but the aftermath had only begun. Lila stood alone in the curator's office, her reflection caught between two worlds, the one that had humiliated her and the one she was finally reclaiming. The blue silk scarf, the one Sabine had dusted with poison powder, sat sealed in a clear evidence bag on the desk beside her. She stared at it for a long time, then turned as the door opened quietly behind her. Gabriel Hart entered, his presence steady as the heartbeat of the city. "The board has agreed to the audit," he said, "and the police have the footage. You've done your part." Lila's voice trembled. "They'll drag your name into this." "Let them," he replied simply. "I built my fortune clean. I can stand in any storm." She gave him a small smile. "You always could." He studied her for a moment, the lines around his eyes softening. "You remind me of your mother," he said quietly. "You have her stillness when everyone else shouts." Lila swallowed. "She would have wanted you here. She would have wanted you free." He brushed a strand of damp hair from her face. "I'm sorry it took this long for the truth to find its voice." Lila turned toward the window, watching the crowd below. "It's strange," she said. "I didn't realize how much fear I was carrying until it left me." "That's the thing about cages," he said gently. "They feel lighter when you stop believing they're home." Before she could answer, Ava and Gwyn appeared at the doorway, phone in hand. "You both need to see this." She handed Gabriel the device. On the screen, a live stream played. Sabine, her makeup smeared, speaking to her followers from the back of a police car. Her voice shook with fury. "They think they can destroy us," Sabine spat. "But the Beaumonts are New Orleans royalty. That girl, she's not one of us. She never was." Ava ended the feed with a sigh. "She's still performing, even in handcuffs." Gabriel nodded. "That's all she ever had, performance. It dies when no one's watching." Lila exhaled, steadying herself. "Let her talk. The truth will outlast her noise." Outside, thunder rumbled across the Mississippi. The city seemed to lean closer. Then Adrian entered the office. His tux jacket was gone, his shirt half unbuttoned, his face pale from sleeplessness. He looked at Lila as though searching for permission to breathe. "Lila," he said softly, "I didn't know she'd go that far. I swear I didn't." She didn't turn. "You didn't ask. You never ask. That's how she got this far." "I froze," he said. "I didn't know how to protect you without tearing my family apart." Lila finally faced him, eyes calm but unyielding. "And in doing nothing, you let them tear me apart instead." He closed his eyes. "I deserve that." "You deserve honesty," she said. "And the truth is, I loved you once because I thought you were different. But love isn't meant to shrink one person so the other can fit their family's portrait." He nodded, his throat tight. "I still love you." "I know," she whispered, "but that's not enough anymore." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. Inside were divorce papers, signed, sealed, unflinching. She placed them gently on the desk between them. Adrian's hands trembled as he took them. "Lila, please, don't let this be the end." "It's not the end," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It's the correction." Gabriel stepped forward, his tone measured. "Son, sometimes walking away is the most honest thing a man can do. But if you ever find your courage again, make sure it's for something bigger than pride." Adrian nodded weakly, then turned and left. His footsteps echoed through the hall, one sound fading into 100 memories. When the door shut, Lila finally sat, the exhaustion catching her like gravity. Gabriel poured her a glass of water and placed it before her. "I want to disappear for a while," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "Disappear? No. Begin again, yes." She looked at him surprised. "There's an old property on the bayou," he said. "Your mother dreamed of turning it into a place for women rebuilding their lives. It's yours now, if you want it." Her eyes filled. "A second chance?" He nodded. "No, a first one, on your terms." Outside, the rain began again, soft and cleansing. The reporters had started to leave. The lights dimmed. The museum stood quieter than it ever had. Lila rose, taking the sealed evidence bag in her hand one last time. "I'll drop this with the police. Let them finish what they started." Her father smiled proudly. "You've already finished it." She looked back at the ballroom through the glass, her sugar sails still standing on their pedestal, catching what little sunlight filtered through the clouds, fragile, translucent, and still shining. That night, as the museum doors closed, Lila walked out under the rain with her father by her side. The scarf she once wore as decoration now rested in her bag, not a symbol of shame anymore, but proof that even under glass, the truth could still breathe. The next morning, sunlight poured over New Orleans like forgiveness. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered, in headlines, in conversations, and in the quiet rooms where people finally dared to speak her name without mockery. Lila Hart. No longer the thief bride, no longer the outsider. Now, she was the woman who had stood her ground while the powerful unraveled around her. But she didn't linger to watch the city gossip. Instead, she returned to the life she'd almost lost, the bakery on Magazine Street. The shop was still, faintly sweet with the scent of vanilla and burnt sugar. Dust had settled on the glass case where her pastries once gleamed. She unlocked the door, swept the floor, and tied her hair back with a simple blue ribbon. The first batch of dough felt unfamiliar under her fingers. Then memory returned. Measured rhythm, gentle weight, muscle, and mercy. When she slid the tray into the oven, the timer's soft tick felt like a heartbeat restarting. A knock startled her. She turned to find a familiar face at the door, Nurse Celeste, a woman who'd once bought cupcakes for the Children's Wing fundraisers. "I heard," Celeste said, eyes full of warmth. "Everyone heard. You showed them what grace looks like." Lila smiled faintly. "Grace tastes better with sugar." They shared a small laugh before Celeste pressed a folded newspaper against the counter. "Page 1, she said. The headline read, "Hart Foundation exposes fraud in Blue Water Scandal. New scholarship announced for women in maritime science." Beneath the print, a photo captured Gabriel Hart at the podium, Lila beside him. She looked calm, unbothered, like someone who had already stepped into tomorrow. Celeste pointed at the caption. "He named it after you, the Lila Hart Resilience Grant." Lila's eyes softened. "He didn't tell me." Celeste grinned. "Fathers don't brag. They just act." When the nurse left, Lila sat at one of the corner tables and stared at the newspaper for a long time. The sunlight hit the window just right, scattering through the glass jars of sugar into little blue prisms. For the first time in months, the reflection that looked back at her felt familiar again. The bell above the door jingled once more. This time, it was Adrian. He stood hesitantly in the doorway, tie gone, sleeves rolled up, eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. He looked smaller somehow, as if shame had stripped him of the armor his family name had once given. "Lila," he said softly. She turned, but didn't speak. "I didn't come to change your mind," he said. I need to say it. I was a coward." She wiped her hands on a towel. "I know." He swallowed. "And I thought keeping peace was love, but peace built on silence isn't peace at all." Her chest tightened. "No, it isn't." He took a step closer, voice trembling. "When they accused you, I saw your face. You weren't afraid. You were hurt. Because the one person who should have stood beside you didn't." The memory of that night, the whispers, the flashing lights, the way he'd frozen, rose again, but this time it didn't sting as sharply. "You didn't just fail me, Adrian," she said quietly. "You failed yourself." "I know," he said, "and I don't expect forgiveness." She hesitated, then nodded. "Good, because forgiveness isn't something you expect. It's something you grow into." He looked at her bakery, at the soft hum of the oven, the sunlight spilling across the counter. "You rebuilt this place fast." "It was never broken," she said. "Just waiting." He smiled faintly. "I hope someday you find someone who never makes you wait for respect." "I already have," she said. "Me." He nodded, his throat tight. "Goodbye, Lila." When the door closed behind him, she didn't cry. She simply stood there, hands resting on the counter, feeling the peace that comes not from being loved, but from being known. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. "The Clear Day Foundation is yours. I'll handle the setup. You handle the heart." Lila smiled through quiet tears. She wiped the flour from her fingers and texted back. "Then let's make something good from all this glass." Outside, a group of neighborhood girls passed by the bakery window, pointing at the new sign she had hung that morning. "Clear Day Bakes. Profits support the foundation." "Look," one whispered. "That's her, the woman from the news." Lila waved through the glass. The girls waved back, their eyes bright with awe, maybe even hope. She tied her scarf around her neck, not the old one, but a new silk, pale blue like a clear sky, and whispered to herself, "They'll remember this version of me." The oven timer chimed. She turned to pull out the tray, golden and perfect, steam curling like forgiveness. And somewhere in the distance, on the museum's rooftop, sunlight struck the sapphire crown once more, its reflection scattering across the glass ceiling, just as her father's words echoed in her memory. "Truth doesn't destroy, it cleanses." By late afternoon, the bakery had filled with the hum of quiet life again. Clinking cups, the rustle of newspapers, and the scent of warm bread drifting through open windows. For the first time in months, Lila didn't feel watched. She just was. But across town, at the newly reopened Beaumont Maritime Museum, another kind of light flickered. Camera flashes. The board meeting Gabriel had ordered had now evolved into a full public review. Journalists sat in rows beneath the vaulted ceiling, waiting for the official statement. Lila didn't plan to attend. She'd told her father as much that morning. "They took my dignity once. I don't need to stand there and watch them try to return it." Gabriel had only smiled. "You're not going to watch them return it. You're going to define what it means." Now, as dusk settled, her car pulled into the museum courtyard once more. The same marble steps that had been a stage for her humiliation were now lined with lights and a modest podium. The banner read, "Public Transparency Hearing. Beaumont Museum Restructuring." When Lila stepped out, whispers rippled through the crowd. Cameras turned. She wasn't wearing designer silk or borrowed diamonds, just a white blouse, dark jeans, and the new pale blue scarf tied neatly at her neck. Simplicity looked powerful on her. Adrian was already on the steps, seated beside Genevieve. He rose when he saw her, uncertain whether to smile or apologize. She gave him a brief nod, enough to be kind, not enough to invite closeness. Sabine's chair sat empty, a single press tag marked "In Custody" clipped to the backrest. The museum director stepped to the microphone. "Tonight, the Beaumont Museum formally announces an independent oversight committee under the Hart Foundation. All historical and financial records are now open to public audit. Furthermore, the Creole coronet will remain here, displayed permanently as a symbol of ethical restoration." He glanced toward Lila, and as per Mr. Hart's request, Mrs. Lila Hart Beaumont will deliver closing remarks. A hush swept over the hall. Lila stepped forward slowly, her heart steady, but her hands trembling slightly. She rested them on the podium, looked out across the crowd, trustees, reporters, tourists, strangers, and began. When I first walked into this museum as Adrian's wife, I thought history was about preservation, about protecting what was beautiful from being lost. But I learned something else. Sometimes, the thing that needs protecting most isn't an artifact. It's integrity. The room stayed silent. She continued, her voice stronger now. "This crown," she said, glancing toward the glass case behind her, "was hidden, stolen, and found again. But what mattered wasn't the metal or the stones. It was what its story revealed. It showed how easily people confuse reputation with worth, and how fragile truth looks until you hold it to the light." A few heads nodded among the crowd. "When I was accused," she said softly, "I was told to stay quiet, to trust that power would correct itself. But power doesn't correct, it protects itself. Only courage can correct." And her eyes found Adrian's in the audience. He didn't look away this time. "So tonight, I'm not here for revenge," she said. "I'm here to remind us all that transparency isn't just glass in a museum. It's the promise that what's seen and what's true finally match." A long silence, then applause. Slow at first, then swelling, echoing through the marble halls like rain on rooftops. Genevieve's posture wilted. She clutched her pearls and murmured to no one in particular, "She sounds just like her father." Gabriel, standing at the back, smiled faintly. "No," he said quietly, "she sounds like herself." After the applause faded, Lila turned toward the glass case holding the restored sapphire crown. It glowed under the lights, blue as the scarf she wore, clear as the life she'd reclaimed. She whispered to herself, "Not a prison anymore, a reflection." When she stepped off the podium, Adrian approached her cautiously. "You were extraordinary," he said. She smiled politely. "Truth usually is." He hesitated. "I don't expect anything, but if you ever need help with your foundation, I'd like to be part of it, quietly." Lila studied him for a long moment. "Then start by helping someone who doesn't carry my last name," she said softly. "That's where real change begins." He nodded, understanding. "I will." They parted without bitterness, just quiet acceptance. Two people who had loved each other deeply but learned different lessons from the same storm. As Lila stepped outside, the night air felt clean. She walked down the marble steps, her heels clicking softly, her reflection following her across the wet pavement. Gabriel joined her halfway. "You did more than expose them," he said. "You turned glass into a mirror." Lila smiled up at him. "That's what truth does. It makes people see themselves." He took her hand, father and daughter side by side, the museum glowing behind them like a ship made of light. And when the cameras flashed one last time, the image that spread across the world wasn't of scandal or shame, but of two people walking away from the ruins of deceit, their reflections clear, unbroken, and shining like sapphire. The following morning, the headlines told a different kind of story. Beaumont, Empire collapses in ethics probe, museum under new leadership. Heiress turns accusation into reform. For the first time, Lila's name appeared beside the word justice instead of shame. But in the quiet of her bakery, none of that mattered. She was back where she belonged, measuring sugar, tempering chocolate, letting the rhythm of simple work soothe her. The bell above the door chimed with each new customer, and the space smelled like vanilla and second chances. Gabriel stopped by late in the morning, his suit jacket casually slung over one arm. He looked around, taking in the chalkboard menu and the jars of homemade jam stacked by the register. "You rebuilt all this in 3 weeks," he said, a note of pride in his voice. Lila smiled. "It's easier to rebuild something you truly love. I think the universe gives you a shortcut when your intentions are clean." He chuckled. "You sound like your mother." "Was she practical?" Lila asked. "She was relentless," he said, kindness wrapped around steel. She leaned against the counter. Then maybe I inherited the right parts from both of you. Gabriel nodded. You did. Then his voice softened. You sure you're ready for what comes next? When you start this foundation, people will test you again. The press loves redemption stories, but they love tearing them down even more. I know, she said. But this time I have my own platform. They can't rewrite the story if I tell it myself. Before he could answer, the door opened, and a nervous young woman stepped inside. Her hair was tied back messily, her clothes simple. She clutched a folder to her chest. Are you Mrs. Hart? She asked timidly. Lila smiled. Just Lila, please. The girl hesitated, then said, I was one of the interns at the museum. I helped set up the exhibit that night. I didn't know what they were doing, I swear, but I saw Dr. Monroe's name on those orders, and I was scared to say anything. Lila motioned her to sit. You did the right thing coming here. The girl shook her head. No, I didn't. I came too late. Gabriel stepped closer. What's your name? Anita Flores. He nodded. Anita, you have nothing to fear now. The investigation's open. Your statement can protect others. Anita's eyes watered. They said women like me, assistants, cleaners, we were replaceable. But when I saw you stand there that night, Mrs. Hart, and they called you a thief, and you didn't cry, you just stood straight, I thought maybe we're not replaceable after all. Lila felt her throat tighten. She reached across the counter and gently took Anita's hand. You're not. None of us are. You'll see. Gabriel smiled faintly, watching his daughter become everything he'd hoped for, someone who used power not to crush, but to lift. After Anita left, Lila turned back to her father. This is why I'm doing it. For her and everyone like her. They don't need saving. They need proof that silence isn't the only way to survive. He nodded. Then Clear Day will be more than a foundation. It'll be a lighthouse. Lila smiled, a slow, certain thing. And this time, I'll make sure the glass around it stays clean. That evening, as the sun dipped low, she visited the museum one last time. It was nearly empty now. Quiet, still, the way places feel after a storm. The sapphire crown gleamed under new lighting, now housed in a display engraved with fresh words. Transparency restores what darkness breaks. She stood there for a moment, studying the crown's reflection. It wasn't just an object anymore, it was a promise that no lie could last forever. She placed a small envelope at the base of the display. Inside was her wedding ring and a note. For the truth that set me free. Behind her, she heard soft footsteps. It was Adrian. He didn't come closer, he just watched her, eyes full of quiet regret. I read about your foundation, he said softly. It's incredible. She nodded. It's just beginning. He hesitated. I won't ask for forgiveness again. I just wanted you to know I've joined the outreach program you started, the one for kids in the 9th Ward. She turned, surprised. I'm not doing it to make amends, he said quickly. I'm doing it because it's right. Lila's eyes softened. Then you've already changed more than you realize. He smiled faintly. Goodbye, Lila. Goodbye, Adrian. He left without another word, and for once the silence between them wasn't cruel. It was honest. She lingered a moment longer, tracing the glass of the display case. Her reflection shimmered against the sapphire crown, two blues blending into one. Then she whispered, Let the light do its work. Outside, the first stars began to pierce through the evening sky. She walked away from the museum, the city lights glinting off her scarf like scattered jewels. And somewhere deep inside, she knew the final chapter wasn't about loss at all. It was about clarity, the kind that only comes when everything false has fallen away, leaving only what was real all along. The weeks that followed felt like a new season breaking through after a long storm. The world didn't forget the scandal. It replayed it, analyzed it, debated it. But this time, the narrative had changed. From scandal to strength, Lila Hart's foundation empowers women to rebuild. The bride they tried to break is helping others rise. Lila barely read the coverage. She was too busy turning promises into structure. The Clear Day Foundation opened in a renovated boathouse on the edge of Lake Pontchartrain. Sunlight spilling through tall windows, the water glimmering just beyond the dock. The air smelled like salt and lemon oil from the polished tables inside. The sign by the door read, "For every woman who's been called too small to matter." Volunteers filled the rooms. Law students offering free legal advice, therapists running group circles, chefs teaching classes in the small kitchen. Lila had insisted that no one who came through those doors would be looked down upon. No one would be shamed for surviving. That first week, Anita Flores came on board as the foundation's assistant director. She worked tirelessly, often staying late into the night. "You gave me a place to belong," she told Lila one evening, when they were packing boxes of donated clothes. "I'm never wasting it," Lila smiled. "We're all just building something we wish we had when we needed it most." By late May, the foundation had its first major event, a scholarship dinner to raise funds for girls entering maritime engineering programs, a cause both poetic and practical. "Because the next generation should navigate their own oceans," Lila said in her invitation speech. The dinner took place at a refurbished harbor cafe, simple and bright, with string lights dancing over the water. As guests began to arrive, donors, reporters, students, Gabriel Hart took a seat near the back, preferring to watch quietly. He'd never looked prouder. "Your mother would have loved this," he told Lila as she adjusted the microphone. She smiled softly. She always believed light belongs in broken places. When Lila stepped to the podium, her scarf caught the wind, fluttering like a soft blue flame. "A year ago tonight," she began, "I stood in a glass room where truth was treated like a stranger. I was called a thief, a liar, an imposter. But that night also taught me something. No one can steal what's inside you unless you hand it over." The crowd listened in stillness. The evening light fell across the lake, painting it gold. "So," she continued, "this foundation isn't about revenge, it's about restoration. Because sometimes, the best way to reclaim your story is to help someone else write theirs." Applause swelled like music. Gabriel rose halfway through, clapping before anyone else dared to. After the event ended, as guests trickled out, Lila stood by the dock, watching the lights shimmer on the water. The sapphire tones reflected off the ripples, mirroring the color of the crown now resting under protective glass back at the museum. The same shade that had once symbolized shame now turned into strength. Gabriel joined her, his hands in his pockets. "You know," he said, "I always thought your mother's legacy would be the technology we built, but I think it's you." She laughed softly. "You gave me the tools, Papa. I just built something different." He studied her quietly. "You did it without bitterness. That's rarer than genius." They stood side by side as the last of the guests left, their reflections glowing in the dark water. Then Gabriel's phone buzzed. He frowned, reading the message, then handed it to her. It was a photo. Adrian, standing beside a group of teenage volunteers, helping repaint a neighborhood youth center. The caption read, "Every cleanup starts with accountability." Lila handed the phone back. "He's finding his way." Gabriel nodded. "Everyone's storm leads them somewhere. Yours led you here." The wind shifted again, cool against her skin. She untied her scarf, held it up, and watched it dance in the breeze before draping it over the railing, letting it flutter against the night. Her father watched her with gentle curiosity. "Letting go?" She smiled. "Not of the past, just the weight of it." The scarf swayed, catching the starlight, then settled, a piece of fabric transformed, like everything else in her life. As they walked back toward the building, the voices of laughter drifted through the open doors. Anita was giving a tour to a group of new volunteers. "This place exists because one woman refused to be defined by shame," she was saying. Lila paused at the threshold, listening. Then she looked at her father. You were right, she said. Glass doesn't just reflect. It magnifies the light that's already there. Gabriel smiled. And sometimes, he said, it's the daughters who remind the fathers how to see. Together they stepped inside, the doors closing softly behind them, the sound of the waves fading into peace. 6 months later, autumn settled over New Orleans like a warm sigh. The air was softer now, heavy with the scent of pralines and river wind, and for once, Lila Hart felt like the city was breathing in rhythm with her. The clear day foundation had grown faster than anyone expected. The little boathouse on Lake Pontchartrain was now the heart of something far larger. A network of mentorship programs, micro-grants, and community kitchens run by women who had once been silenced but now stood proudly in their own light. On this particular afternoon, the foundation was hosting its first open workshop. Mothers, students, and local business owners gathered around long tables, laughing, sharing food, passing notebooks filled with ideas. The room buzzed with purpose. Lila moved among them with calm energy, her blue scarf tucked neatly around her neck. "Remember," she said, smiling at a young woman presenting her business plan, "the goal isn't perfection. It's progress. Leave room for the next version of yourself to show up." The woman grinned. "You sound like my therapist." Lila chuckled. "Good. That means we're doing something right." Near the back, Anita arranged paperwork while a local news crew filmed quiet footage for a feature story. "You're trending again," she teased, "but this time for the right reasons." Lila rolled her eyes good-naturedly. "If it helps more women find us, I'll take it." Ava Nguyen, her ever-practical attorney and friend, entered holding 2 coffees. "You've got a visitor," she said, her tone somewhere between serious and amused. "And no, not a reporter." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Ava stepped aside. Standing by the door was Genevieve Beaumont. The older woman looked smaller than Lila remembered. No pearls, no audience, just a cream cardigan and a faded handbag clutched tightly in both hands. Her hair, once sculpted into elegance, had begun to gray at the edges. Her expression wavered between pride and something unfamiliar. Humility. Lila felt the room go still. Conversations hushed. Even the news crew quietly turned off their lights. "Mrs. Beaumont," Lila said softly, her tone polite but distant. "This is unexpected." Genevieve gave a tight smile. "I imagine most things are, when life humbles you." Ava glanced toward Lila for direction, but Lila simply nodded. "It's all right. Would you like to step outside?" They walked to the back patio overlooking the lake, the air thick with the sound of cicadas. The late afternoon sun stretched long reflections across the water, soft and forgiving. Genevieve clasped her hands, the way guilty people do when words don't come easily. "I heard about your foundation," she began, "and about the scholarships. You're helping girls, ones who don't have family to stand up for them." Lila nodded slowly. "That's right." For a long moment, the older woman said nothing. Then her voice cracked. "I came to say I was wrong." Lila stayed silent. "I wanted you to fail, because your grace made me feel small. I told myself you didn't belong because I didn't want to see how cruel we'd become. Sabine was my doing. She learned her arrogance from me." She looked down at her hands. "I thought power meant never being questioned. But the truth is, it only meant I'd never learned how to be kind." The wind shifted across the water. "I don't expect forgiveness," Genevieve said, her voice breaking. "But I needed to look you in the eye and tell you I'm sorry." Lila studied her for a moment. The trembling hands, the watery eyes, the sincerity that no longer sounded rehearsed. And then, quietly, she said, "I forgave you a long time ago." Genevieve blinked. "You did?" Lila nodded. "Not for you, for me. Carrying hate felt too heavy to keep creating something good." Tears filled the older woman's eyes. "You're better than all of us, Lila." "No," Lila said softly. I just finally stopped trying to fit into rooms that weren't built for people like me." They stood there together, silence stretching between them, not bitter this time, just real. When Genevieve left, she paused at the door and turned back. "If you ever need volunteers for one of your events," she said hesitantly, "I'm not very good at sitting still anymore." Lila smiled, small but genuine. "Then we'll find you something to do." When she was gone, Lila lingered by the railing, watching the sun slide behind the clouds. She untied her scarf and held it in her hands for a moment, feeling the texture between her fingers, the color of calm after chaos. Ava joined her quietly. "You handled that better than most people would." Lila smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't weakness, Ava. It's just choosing peace over poison." Her friend nodded. "So, what's next?" Lila gazed across the lake, where the water caught the light like glass. "Next," she said, "we build something that lasts longer than pain." And in that moment, as the last rays of daylight glowed over the foundation building, over the laughter and chatter inside, over the reflection of a city learning how to heal, it felt as though the entire world had exhaled with her. The wind lifted, and the blue scarf fluttered gently in her hands, no longer a symbol of accusation, but of release. 9 months later, the city of New Orleans was drenched in sunlight. The storm season had passed, and the air along the Mississippi carried the scent of magnolia and salt. The grand reopening of the Beaumont Maritime Museum drew crowds from every corner of the city. Tourists, journalists, and locals who wanted to witness what redemption looked like under glass. At the heart of the event stood Lila Hart, founder of the Clear Day Foundation, in a soft blue dress that mirrored the hue of the sapphire crown now restored to its rightful place. The museum gleamed like it had been reborn. Where once humiliation had echoed, now stood renewal. She hadn't planned to attend, but Gabriel insisted. "History only holds power," he told her that morning, "if we choose how it remembers us." Inside the atrium, sunlight poured through the ceiling, scattering through the crystal chandeliers. The restored Creole coronet sat in its new case, its glass inscribed with the words Lila had written herself. "Truth needs no permission." Reporters swarmed, microphones raised. "Mrs. Hart, do you believe forgiveness is possible after everything that happened here?" Lila smiled softly. "Forgiveness isn't about forgetting," she said. "It's about refusing to live chained to what broke you." Cameras flashed. Her voice carried the steadiness of someone who had finally stopped bleeding. Among the crowd, Genevieve Beaumont stood quietly at the edge of the room, wearing a volunteer badge. She was wiping the koi pond's rim with a rag. Sleeves rolled to her elbows. When Lila noticed her, she excused herself from the reporters and walked over. "You kept your word," Lila said gently. Genevieve nodded, her voice small. "Cleaning glass has its lessons. I never realized how clear things get when you stop trying to make them shine for everyone else." Lila smiled. "It suits you." They stood together for a long moment, looking at the sapphire crown under the sunlight. The gem seemed to pulse with life, blue fire refracting across the marble. "I never thanked you," Genevieve said quietly, "for letting me face this place again." "I didn't do it for you," Lila said kindly. "I did it for the women watching us, so they'd see there's a way through without hate." Genevieve nodded, a tear tracing down her cheek. "You remind me of the daughter I wish I'd raised. And you remind me of the woman I might have become," Lila said softly. "If I hadn't learned to listen to myself first." They exchanged a fragile smile. Then Lila turned toward the podium as the crowd gathered for the dedication ceremony. Gabriel took the stage first, his voice low but commanding. "This museum once stood for wealth and prestige. But thanks to one woman's courage, it now stands for integrity and renewal." He gestured toward his daughter. "Please welcome the woman who taught us all that dignity, once taken, can be rebuilt. Brick by truth, and truth alone. Lila Hart." Applause thundered through the hall as Lila stepped forward. She paused, scanning the crowd. The press, her father, the board members, the former staff, and Genevieve. Wiping tears she no longer tried to hide. "When I first stood in this room," Lila began, "I thought my life had ended. But pain has a strange purpose. It forces you to see what's real. That night, when everything was stripped away, I found something I didn't know I still had, the choice to stand tall." She looked toward the sapphire crown, its glow like captured sky. Tonight, this crown returns to its place not because it's flawless, but because it survived. Like so many of us, like every woman who has ever been framed by a lie, or silenced by fear, or told she wasn't enough, we survived. A hush fell over the crowd, some wiping tears, others clapping softly. Lila smiled, her voice breaking slightly. "I used to think justice was about punishment, but now I know it's about light, about transparency, about letting truth shine through even the cracks." The audience rose in applause. Cameras flashed. But for Lila, none of it mattered. She wasn't performing anymore. She was simply living. As the crowd dispersed, she found Gabriel waiting by the steps. He reached for her hand. "You've turned every wound into a window," he said proudly. She squeezed his fingers. "You gave me the courage to open it." They walked together out into the courtyard, where lanterns swayed in the evening breeze. Across the water, the city glowed gold against the twilight. From behind, Genevieve's voice called softly, "Mrs. Hart?" Lila turned. The older woman held out a small box wrapped in blue ribbon. "I thought you should have this. It belonged to Sabine. She wanted everything that sparkled. Maybe it's time something she touched brought light instead." Lila hesitated, then accepted the box. "Thank you." When she opened it later, alone by the river, she found a single sapphire pendant inside. Small, imperfect, but beautiful. She fastened it around her neck and whispered, "Let what was meant for harm become something that heals." The wind lifted gently, carrying her scarf across her shoulders like a quiet benediction. The museum lights shimmered behind her, reflecting in the river, a mosaic of glass and sky, forgiveness and truth. As the night deepened, Lila walked home beside her father, the sapphire pendant catching the glow of passing streetlights, each flash a reminder. Transparency had always been her inheritance, and for the first time she didn't feel like someone's daughter or someone's wife. She felt like herself, whole, luminous, and free.